My name is Rachel Carter. I was 28 years old the day my mother chose a backyard barbecue instead of attending my doctoral graduation. I remember standing inside a cramped bathroom stall at Johns Hopkins, holding my phone between my shoulder and cheek so my tears wouldn't ruin the makeup I had done myself. Outside the door, the sound of the crowd echoed through the hall, the booming voice announcing names, microphones crackling, and applause rising and falling. Inside that stall, all I could hear was the blood pounding in my ears and my mother's voice repeating in my mind, "We already ate, honey." I stared at the text message for almost a full minute before it truly registered. We already ate. A photo followed. It showed a long folding table set up in my parents' backyard, covered with trays of ribs and brisket. People were laughing with red Solo cups in their hands. My older brother stood proudly at the grill like a local celebrity. The caption read, "So proud of you, E, best pitmaster in the city." There was no "good luck, Rachel." No, "we're on our way." Just smoke, meat, and a celebration I wasn't part of. My fingers trembled as I pressed call. "Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You know my ceremony starts in 10 minutes, right?" In the background, I could hear music and conversation, the hiss of the grill, and someone calling my brother's name. "Oh, honey, don't be so sensitive," she replied, as casually as if I had complained about the weather. "We're doing something special for your brother today. He booked a city food critic. We can watch your ceremony on the live stream later." I swallowed hard. "It's my doctorate, Mom. 8 years. You promised you'd be here." There was a short pause before my father's voice came through the phone, louder and clearly impatient. "Rachel, don't be dramatic. Your brother works hard too. We can't be everywhere at once." That was the moment something inside me finally broke. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. Cap, gown, honor cords, the life I had built mostly on my own. And in that moment, I realized something uncomfortable but undeniable. For 28 years, I had been a supporting character in my own family's story. That phone call was the last one I ever made as Rachel Carter. Before I explain what happened next, and how a single decision eventually placed my family's beloved barbecue empire at the center of a public scandal, tell me something first. What time is it where you are? And what are you doing while listening to this? I'm curious to see how far this story travels compared to the small backyard where mine nearly ended. If you've ever been the responsible one in a family that celebrates someone else, you probably know that the small cuts appear long before the major betrayal. By the time I stood in that bathroom, I had already lived 28 years as the second choice Carter. My parents built their entire identity around smoke and barbecue sauce. Carter's Backyard Barbecue wasn't simply a restaurant. For our family, it was almost a belief system. My brother could burn a rack of ribs, and my mother would still praise him. "Look at him," she would say proudly. "He's a natural." Meanwhile, I brought home science fair trophies, full-ride scholarships, and published research papers. The usual response I received was, "That's nice, honey. Don't forget to help your brother at the register tonight." While Ethan practiced charming food bloggers, I learned to chart infection curves and write grant proposals. While my parents proudly talked about Ethan's famous brisket to anyone willing to listen, they couldn't remember the name of my dissertation advisor. So no, that phone call didn't come out of nowhere. It was simply the first time I clearly heard the message they had been sending for years. "You will never be our main event." I walked out of that bathroom before I could talk myself into apologizing. The event coordinator was already guiding graduates toward the line forming behind the stage. Around me, people gathered with their families. Parents adjusting caps, siblings fixing collars, groups taking emotional selfies beneath the banners. I walked alone, holding my folder tightly as if it might float away. One of my classmates looked around and then asked, "Hey, is your family running late?" I gave the small automatic smile people develop when they don't want to explain their entire history. "They're watching from home." "That's unfortunate," she said bluntly. "You're the smartest person in the cohort. They should be sitting in the front row." Her words stung because they were so direct and so accurate. Have you ever had a stranger show you more appreciation in a single sentence than your own family has in years? I took my seat. The empty row of chairs behind me felt louder than the entire arena. When the dean began announcing names, applause echoed across the room. I sat there thinking, maybe this is simply how life will continue. I'll keep doing the work, and they'll keep grilling ribs. Then my name echoed through the speakers. Rachel Carter, Doctor of Public Health, Epidemiology, and Data Science. I walked across the stage to polite applause from faculty and classmates, and silence from the people whose approval I had chased since childhood. When the dean handed me the diploma case and leaned in for the photograph, he quietly said, "Congratulations, doctor. Your work is going to save many lives." That moment shifted something deeper than disappointment. If my research could help strangers, why was I still exhausting myself trying to be noticed by people who hadn't even shown up? After the ceremony, while other graduates disappeared into crowds of flowers and family hugs, I stepped into a quiet hallway and checked my phone. The Carter family group chat was filled with photos from the barbecue. My brother stood in front of a large banner that read, "Ethan Carter, King of Smoke." Relatives had left enthusiastic comments, "So proud of our star. Can't wait to visit the restaurant." Not one message mentioned my degree. My thumb hovered over the keyboard before slowly dropping. Instead, I opened a different app, the one I had bookmarked months earlier, but never had the courage to use. It was a legal name change form. I stared at the empty fields for a moment before typing slowly. New name, Naomi Lane. It was a name I had scribbled in the margins of notebooks for years. The name I always imagined using someday when my real life began. Standing there in my doctoral gown, holding my diploma while barbecue smoke practically drifted through my phone screen, I realized something. Someday was now. By the time the sun set on my graduation day, Rachel Carter was already fading like smoke. That evening, I didn't celebrate at a restaurant or attend a family party. Instead, I sat at the small kitchen table in my apartment with my laptop open and paperwork spread around me between a frozen pizza and an overdue electricity bill. Not glamorous, I know, but the silence felt meaningful. There was no grill sizzling, no beer bottles clinking, no relatives praising my brother while I refilled their iced tea. Only the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the steady tapping of my fingers as I rewrote my own identity. If you've never gone through the process of legally changing your name, it's a strange mix of bureaucracy and renewal. I filled out forms, printed affidavits, and scheduled an appointment at the courthouse. Under Reason for Change, I typed personal and professional identity. What I really wanted to write was, because I'm finished being the background character in a restaurant commercial. I posted one photo from the ceremony on my private Instagram account, a simple picture of me wearing my gown, holding my cap, with the stage behind me already half dismantled. The caption read, "Dr. Lane, coming soon." A few friends commented with confusion and excitement. "Wait, are we changing names now? Dr. Lane sounds like a superhero." One message stood out. It was from my graduate school friend, Jenna, who had moved to Seattle the year before to work at a health tech startup. "Lane? Huh?" she wrote. "I like it. Are you still doing that interview with Northwatch Analytics?" I had almost forgotten. Weeks earlier, I had applied to a position at Northwatch, a company that used real-time data to detect disease outbreaks before they spread. They liked my dissertation on foodborne illness modeling and had offered me. It began with a simple thought. One day you're going to realize your daughter became a doctor, and you weren't there. And one day you might need my help, and for the first time in my life, I'm not certain I'll answer the phone. I signed the letter, "Love Naomi," then folded it and placed it in the back of my journal. It wasn't meant for them. It was for me, a clear boundary, a personal commitment that I would no longer chase people who wouldn't even walk across a parking lot for me. When the plane finally lifted off the runway and the city grew smaller beneath me, I watched the lights blur together and thought, all right, Dr. Lane, let's see who you become when no one introduces you as Ethan's sister. Seattle didn't care about my brother or how many awards he had for his ribs. Seattle cared about data, and that was exactly what I needed. Northwatch Analytics occupied 2 floors of a glass building overlooking the water. The office was open and modern, filled with whiteboards covered in equations and notes. On my first day, my manager, a woman with blue streaks in her hair and a coffee cup that never seemed empty, smiled and said, "We hunt ghosts in numbers here. Tiny signals that suggest something bad is developing before anyone else notices. Ready to start chasing? I was. I immediately immersed myself in streams of hospital admissions, restaurant inspection reports, social media complaints about food poisoning, and numerous other data sources. Our role was to detect patterns, clusters of symptoms in specific neighborhoods, sudden increases in emergency room visits that might signal the beginning of an outbreak. I loved the work. It felt like solving complex puzzles that could genuinely save lives. For the first time, my value was measured by more than how many plates I could carry during a dinner rush. Months passed. I grew accustomed to the damp chill of Seattle mornings, the city smelling of rain and coffee rather than smoke and barbecue sauce. I made friends with coworkers who knew me simply as Naomi, the epidemiologist who could study a spreadsheet until it revealed its hidden patterns. Whenever people asked about my family, I kept the answer brief. We're complicated. One Tuesday afternoon, a notification appeared on my screen. Our algorithm had flagged something unusual. There was a small but noticeable cluster of severe gastrointestinal illness cases across 3 neighboring counties. At first glance, it resembled a normal seasonal spike. But the more closely I examined the data, the more concerned I became. The onset times were unusually tight, the symptoms were intense, and most concerning, nearly every patient mentioned eating at the same popular restaurant chain during their intake interviews. I ran the restaurant name through a separate query and paused. Carter Smokehouse, I read aloud. For a moment, my brain struggled to process the words. It felt strangely familiar, like looking into a distorted mirror. Different location, same pattern. Everything okay? Jenna asked, rolling her chair toward my desk. I turned my screen slightly so she could see the cluster of red dots on the map. I think we're seeing a group of cases linked to a restaurant chain, I said carefully. Have you heard of Carter Smokehouse? Of course, she said with a short laugh. They just opened a location here. People are obsessed with it. The line for their brisket wraps around the block. Why? I opened more records, my heartbeat gradually speeding up. Patients describing severe diarrhea, vomiting, and high fevers. Lab results beginning to confirm infections with E. coli and salmonella. Because, I said slowly, if this pattern continues, they may be the source of the outbreak. We followed standard procedure. I escalated the case to my manager, documented the evidence, and prepared a preliminary report for the state health department. On the surface, it was routine work, but for me, nothing about it felt routine. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about my parents' kitchen. I remembered how many times I had watched my brother place raw meat on the cutting board, wipe his hands on a towel, and then reach into an open bag of buns. I remembered pointing out the cross-contamination risks, and I remembered the response. This is how we've always done it, Rachel. Stop overthinking everything. Over the next several days, the red dots on my screen multiplied. More hospitals, more patients, more references to Carter Smokehouse. Soon, the state health department contacted us, requesting deeper analysis and complete access to our supporting data. This was no longer a few isolated cases of food poisoning. It was an outbreak. One night, I woke up suddenly, my phone screen lighting the dark room above my face. Without thinking, I opened the Carter family group chat, the one I hadn't checked in months. The most recent photo showed my brother standing proudly in front of a banner that read, "Coming soon, Carter Smokehouse West Coast Tour." The caption said, "Proud of our boy taking the Grand National." My mother had commented, "Nobody does barbecue like a Carter." As I stared at the image, a realization formed that made my stomach turn more than any illness report ever had. If the chain had expanded this quickly, the outbreak I was tracking might only be the beginning. There's a moment when you're holding information that could destroy your own family's business, and every version of yourself begins arguing at once. The loyal daughter says, "Call them, warn them, give them time to fix the problem quietly." The scientist says, "That's not how public health works. People are already sick. Some of them are children." And the hurt child says, "They skipped your doctoral graduation for a barbecue. Are you really going to risk your career to protect them?" I wish I could say I chose the right voice immediately. I didn't. For a full week, I struggled with the decision. During the day, I refined our models, created clearer visual reports for the health department, and participated in calls with epidemiologists who used words like alarming and significant liability. At night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, thinking about how many birthdays and school events I had missed because I was working at the restaurant to support the family. The decision finally became clear the day we received a call from a pediatric ICU physician. He requested access to our data because he had 3 children in critical condition with the same strain of E. coli. They shared one detail in common. Each of them had eaten at Carter's Smokehouse within the previous week. After ending that call, I walked directly to my manager's office and closed the door behind me. "I need to disclose something," I said, my hands slightly damp with nervousness. "I have a personal connection to the restaurant chain." Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "In what way?" "My parents own the original location," I replied. "My brother runs the company now." There it was, spoken openly like a sensitive nerve exposed. But she didn't react with shock. "Okay," she said calmly. "Thank you for telling me." "That means 2 things," she continued. "First, you're removed from any policy recommendations from this point forward, so there's no conflict of interest. Second, I want to ask you something as a person, not as your manager. Do they know what's happening?" "No," I admitted. "We're not close." "Do you want to tell them?" I thought about the children in the ICU. I thought about my brother smiling in front of banners, proudly calling himself the king of smoke. I thought about my parents insisting that no one had ever gotten sick from our food whenever I tried to discuss safe cooking temperatures. "I want them to be held accountable," I said slowly. "If I call them, it won't be to protect them. It will be to give them an opportunity to do the right thing before the state forces them." She nodded. "Then call them as a daughter. We'll continue doing our jobs." That evening, for the first time in almost a year, I dialed my parents' number. My mother answered on the second ring, her voice cheerful. "Naomi, or are we still supposed to call you Rachel?" "Naomi is fine," I said calmly. "I don't have much time. I need to talk to you about the restaurant." "If this is about you refusing to come home and help," she started, "your father already said." "It's not," I interrupted. "Have you received any reports of people getting seriously ill after eating there?" She paused. "Well, there have been a few complaints online. Your brother says it's just people trying to hurt his ratings." My chest tightened. "I'm asking because I work with a company that tracks disease outbreaks," I explained. "We've identified a cluster that points directly to Carter's Smokehouse. People are in the hospital. Mom, kids are involved." Silence followed. Then I heard my father's voice in the background. "Is that Naomi? Put me on speaker." A click echoed, and then his firm voice filled my quiet Seattle kitchen. "So now you're accusing your own family business of poisoning people after everything we've done to build it from nothing?" "I'm not accusing anyone," I replied carefully. "I'm telling you what the data shows. You need to shut down temporarily and cooperate with health inspectors. Clean the kitchens, retrain staff, and check your suppliers. If you act quickly, you might avoid." "We are not shutting down," he interrupted sharply. "Do you have any idea what that would do to our reputation? To your brother's bookings? We have a city festival coming up. He's the main attraction." There it was again. His moment. Not the children in the ICU, not the dozens of customers in hospitals. His moment. "If you don't close voluntarily," I said quietly, "the state will force you. They already have our reports. I'm not just calling as your daughter. I'm warning you as someone who understands how serious this is." Before anyone else spoke, my brother's voice cut into the conversation. "Is this seriously about you being upset that we didn't come to your little ceremony? You're going to sabotage my company because your feelings are hurt?" "It was a doctorate," I replied, losing my patience for the first time. "And I'm not sabotaging anything. I'm trying to stop people from getting sick." He laughed in disbelief. "You always thought your books and numbers mattered more than real life." "Real life?" I repeated. "Real life is a parent sitting beside a hospital bed because someone didn't bother to check a meat thermometer." "That's enough," my father said firmly. "We are not discussing this further. You do whatever you need to do for your job, and we'll handle our business. But don't expect gratitude if you drag our name through the mud." The line went silent. I stood there with the phone against my ear, listening to nothing. Have you ever watched someone choose their pride over the simplest opportunity to fix a problem? That night, I stopped expecting my family to become the people I needed them to be. The following morning, I contacted a public interest law firm that specialized in whistleblower cases. If the Carters wanted a conflict between evidence and denial, they were about to learn what happens when you underestimate the quiet person who used to refill the sauce bottles while others took the credit. The state moved faster than my parents expected. Within 2 weeks, inspectors quietly visited several Carter Smokehouse locations. They collected samples, interviewed employees, and reviewed additional laboratory results. The outbreak that had first appeared as a cluster of red dots on my screen was officially confirmed. Local news stations began broadcasting warnings advising anyone who had eaten at Carter Smokehouse to monitor themselves for symptoms. My brother responded the way he always did, with confidence. He posted a video standing in front of the flagship restaurant. Wearing an apron with flames rising from the grill behind him, he spoke directly to the camera. At Carter Smokehouse, we take food safety extremely seriously, he said with a practiced smile. We serve our own family here. Don't believe everything you hear in the news. Critics will always try to bring you down, but we're not going anywhere. The video received thousands of likes and supportive comments. Tell them, chef, people wrote. I watched the clip from my office in Seattle, a bitter feeling settling in my stomach. My manager stopped by my desk. The health department wants us to keep monitoring online discussions, she said. There's talk that the company is calling this a smear campaign. Of course they are, I replied quietly. The next development felt almost ironic. A week after my brother posted that video, my mother sent an email to my personal account. The subject line read, Thanksgiving. Inside she wrote, We know things have been tense, but family is family. Why don't you come home for Thanksgiving? It would be good public relations too. Show people we're united. Ethan is hosting a large community cookout instead of a traditional dinner. City officials, reporters, and bloggers will be there. It's a big opportunity. Come support your brother. Maybe we can talk. I must have read that email 20 times. Good public relations, not we miss you. Not we're worried about the outbreak. Not we're sorry we didn't listen. They wanted my presence, my doctorate, my new career, as part of their public image. Part of me wanted to delete the message and move on permanently. Another part of me, the part that had changed her name and moved across the country, recognized an opportunity. If people who built their reputation on image were finally going to face the truth, what better place than a stage they created themselves? I wrote back a short reply, I'll be there. On Thanksgiving Day, the sky above my hometown was a flat gray, the kind that makes smoke hang low over the streets. I hadn't returned since the graduation incident. Walking toward Carter Smokehouse felt like stepping into a preserved memory. The same red checkered tablecloths, the same neon pig sign, the same scent of hickory and spice. But there were new additions too. Banners about commitment to safety, hand sanitizer stations, staff wearing branded gloves. It felt more like a performance than a genuine response, and there was no mention of the hospitalizations that had prompted these changes. My brother noticed me from the small stage set up in the parking lot. He wore a custom chef's coat with his name embroidered in cursive. Naomi, you made it, he announced into the microphone, pulling me into a quick side hug. Everyone, this is my sister, the doctor. She's here to show that real science is on our side. The crowd applauded politely. I stepped back, resisting the urge to react. My mother moved closer and whispered, Just smile. Let people take pictures. This is important for us. Is it important for the families in the ICU? I asked quietly. Her expression tightened. You really intend to ruin this, don't you? No, I said calmly. I intend to tell the truth. The event continued like a public festival. Free samples, live music, local officials greeting the crowd, and cameras moving through the parking lot. My brother confidently repeated phrases like, unfounded allegations, and we passed all inspections during interviews. I watched silently until my phone vibrated with a message from an unknown number. We're here. 10 minutes. It was the state health investigator I had been coordinating with through the law firm. We had provided timelines, data analysis, and internal documentation showing that Carter Smokehouse had been warned and had continued operating at full capacity. When the health department decided to deliver the official shutdown orders, they asked if I wanted to be present. I said yes, not for revenge and not for spectacle, but because I wanted my family to see me when the consequences of their decisions finally arrived. People in the crowd reacted immediately. Some gasped. One person shouted, "My kid got sick here." Another voice called out, "I knew it." My mother turned pale and stepped forward toward the investigator. "There must be some mistake," she said nervously. "We're a family business. We would never." The investigator remained composed. "Ma'am, we have laboratory results, employee testimony, and documented warnings that were ignored." Then she looked past my mother and briefly in my direction. "We also received independent analytical reports that helped us identify the source quickly. Because of that work, additional hospitalizations may have been prevented." My brother turned toward me immediately. "You did this," he said sharply, his voice low now that the microphone was off. "You brought them here." "No," I replied calmly, my voice steadier than it had ever been during family dinners. "Your food safety practices brought them here. I simply refuse to ignore it." "We're your family," my mother cried. "How could you take the side of strangers over us?" I looked around at the crowd, parents holding their children close, reporters writing notes, employees whispering to one another. "Those strangers trusted you to serve safe food," I said. "You treated that trust as if it didn't matter. You missed my doctoral graduation for a barbecue, and now that same barbecue may be the reason someone else's child never reaches theirs." For once, there was no quick response. No accusations that I was exaggerating. Just 3 members of the Carter family standing on a stage while the truth became impossible to ignore. The consequences unfolded exactly the way my parents had feared, and exactly the way their choices had made inevitable. Within weeks, Carter Smokehouse dominated the news cycle. But it wasn't because of my brother's well-known brisket. Headlines focused on the outbreak. Beloved local restaurant chain linked to illness. Families demand accountability. Safety complaints ignored for years. As more employees came forward, the carefully maintained image of family values began to unravel. Stories emerged about managers ordering staff to serve meat that had not reached safe cooking temperatures. Workers described pressure to keep service moving even when they suspected ingredients were spoiled. Cleaning routines had reportedly been shortened to reduce costs. Civil lawsuits began to accumulate. The health department imposed heavy fines, large enough to threaten the entire company's future. My brother lost several sponsorship deals, his television cooking segment, and invitations to major food festivals. Awards that had once been displayed proudly inside glass cases at the restaurant were quietly removed when organizers withdrew them following ethical reviews. My parents were eventually forced to sell 2 of the 3 houses they had purchased during the business's peak years, just to cover legal expenses. If you're expecting me to say that watching all of this gave me satisfaction, the truth is more complicated. I didn't feel the dramatic sense of revenge you often see in movies. What I felt was something heavier, a serious sense of relief that the world was finally operating according to a logic I understood. Actions had consequences. Ignored warnings had costs. The data I worked with had never been just numbers on a screen. They represented real people's lives. And now everyone could see that clearly. The whistleblower case moved quietly through legal channels. Because I had documented everything properly and disclosed my conflict of interest early, I was protected legally. More than that, I was eligible to receive a portion of the financial penalties collected from the company due to our early detection. One day, an email arrived from the law firm. The number included in the message was so large that I read it 3 times before accepting that it was real. It was more money than I had ever imagined having under my own name. Not my brother's. Not my parents'. Mine. I briefly considered buying something symbolic of success, a luxury car or some dramatic purchase. Instead, I did something that would have amazed the younger version of myself. I started a nonprofit organization called the Line Cook Project. The foundation provides free food safety training, legal resources, and whistleblower support for low-wage restaurant workers who notice unsafe practices but are afraid to report them. We partnered with Northwatch to ensure that our educational materials were based on reliable data and easy for workers to understand. We organized workshops across several states. We helped kitchen staff file anonymous reports when managers instructed them to serve undercooked chicken or skip sanitation procedures. Where silence once allowed dangerous practices to continue, we made sure people had the tools to speak up. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same business empire that had treated me as unpaid labor was now indirectly funding a movement designed to protect workers from employers like my own family. My parents tried to call several times. At first, I let the calls go to voicemail. My mother's messages moved from anger to pleading. "How could you do this to us?" eventually became, "We're still your parents." And later, "We just want to talk." My father left one message that stayed with me. "You destroyed your brother," he said. "Are you satisfied now, doctor? You were always too big for this family." I never returned the call. There was nothing I could say that reality hadn't already demonstrated. Several months later, I received a handwritten letter in the mail. It was addressed to Dr. Naomi Lane, written in my mother's familiar looping handwriting. Inside, she explained that the original Carter Smokehouse location was being closed indefinitely. She wrote that they had lost nearly everything. She also mentioned that my brother had withdrawn from most people, was drinking heavily, and believed the world had turned against him. Near the end of the letter, she added one line, "Maybe we should have listened to you earlier. Maybe we should have attended your graduation." I sat with that letter for a long time, not because it fixed anything. It didn't. There was no full apology, no real acknowledgement of the years they spent treating me as a background character in Ethan Carter's story. But it confirmed something I had needed to know since the moment I stood in that bathroom stall wearing my doctoral gown. I had been right to choose myself. Eventually, I replied with a short note. "I'm sorry for the pain everyone is experiencing. I never wanted people to be harmed, but they already were. I chose to stand with them rather than protect a false story. I hope one day you understand that. I am open to conversations that involve honesty and responsibility. I am not willing to pretend that none of this happened." I signed it, Naomi. I never received a reply. For the first time in my life, that silence didn't feel like punishment. It felt like peace. There is one lesson I wish someone had explained to me when I was 18, working in that restaurant and quietly dreaming about something bigger. Blood relationships are not a license to cause harm without consequences. The word family does not erase wrongdoing. Love that requires you to remain small is not love. It is control. Your value is not determined by how loudly your parents celebrate your milestones or whether your sibling receives more attention than you do. Your value exists in the steady effort you put into your work, the integrity of your decisions, and the courage it takes to walk away when staying would mean betraying yourself or others. I didn't destroy my family's business out of spite. I simply turned on the lights in a kitchen they insisted was perfectly clean, even while customers were becoming ill. And by doing that, I stepped out of the smoke and into my own life. So if you're listening to this story and thinking about times when you felt invisible, at family dinners where someone else was praised while you were ignored, at graduations where no one showed up, or at workplaces where your ideas were used but your name was forgotten, remember this. You are allowed to stop chasing people who refuse to see you. You are allowed to choose your own name, your own city, and your own purpose. You are allowed to say, "I will not remain silent simply because we share DNA." And if someone tells you that demanding respect is an overreaction, remember something important. The people who benefit from your silence will always describe your truth as dramatic. Speak it anyway.